Hello folks, this is going to be a basic tutorial on how to use RAWR for Wrath of the Lich King. Now the official last release version of RAWR for Wrath was 2.3.22, but since there were a few errors with fetching pictures and tooltips on that version, especially for private servers, a custom version was made for private servers later. This is 2.3.23. It's, to the best of my knowledge, unofficial, but it works better. It just works better in this day and age. The first thing you want to do with RAWR, especially with the older versions, is to unzip it on a solid state drive. It behaves very erratically and unreliably and very slowly on mechanical hard drives, so just make sure to unzip it on an SSD. It's not a large file, so you won't be having any problems with this. So let's do that now. And now we have unzipped our folder, so we go into it and we click our executable. Now when you open this for the first time, as I'm doing it on this PC, it's a fresh unzip, so obviously there are no saved characters. You can obviously draw any saved characters that this installation knows about, or if you happen to be on Wrath of the Lich King Retail, you could load it straight from the armory. For now, we will close this and populate everything in our character manually. For this example, I will take a Retribution Paladin as my character, because that's easy and I still remember it from my 5 years of not playing Wrath. So let's name it IBPP. And the realm is Fail Central on... yeah, Fail Central sounds like a US realm. The race is a Blood Elf Paladin, and as you can see, it has modules for Holy, Prot, Retribution. We'll be picking Retribution. We'll be picking our professions. The best professions for a Retribution Paladin are, of course, Engineering and Jewel Crafting. Here, if you click Enforce Gem Requirements, it will force your meta gem to check for its requirements before it allows the presence of the meta gem in your simulated DPS. So obviously, we'll be doing that. Since we have Engineering and Jewel Crafting, we of course can't have blacksmithing sockets on our wrists and gloves. But we can have the Eternal Belt Buckle on our belt, so we'll click that. The first thing I do when populating any character is to populate its talents first, not its items. So for Retribution, the meta spec is of course 11.5.55. If you've ever had doubts on how to spec a Retribution Paladin, watch me. If anyone has ever told you to spec a PvE Retribution Paladin differently, tell them they're being bad. And there's our 11.5, and where have I missed 2 points? Here, 55. And now we go for the glyphs. If you're going for absolute best in slot Retribution Paladin, that will be using a Shadowmourne, so we need Glyph of Seal of Vengeance. Then we need Glyph of Judgment, because that's our strongest ability. And then the last glyph, if you are having mana problems with Consecration, if you're not having enough Divine Storm resets and have time to put your Consecration up, or the boss is not moving, you go for Glyph of Consecration here. If not, if your encounter involves frequent disengagement from the boss, then obviously instead of using Glyph of Consecration, you'll be using Glyph of Seal of Righteousness at that point. For the purposes of this simulation, we'll be using Glyph of Consecration. We'll be assuming it's a stationary 5-minute encounter with Bloodlust. And we'll have obviously the option to set that. Now you see only one minor is stated because there's only one minor glyph for Retribution Paladins which counts at all towards our DPS, and that's the Glyph of Sense Undead. Now let's populate our gear slots. So first we want Shadowmourne with strength. and we want Berserking as our enchant. Now, a word about these lines. The red lines are for DPS, and this is real-time simulated DPS for that particular enchant, for that particular gem, that item, whatever. As we start populating our items, more and more of our item slots, and as our accuracy stats get closer to the cap, as our crit stats increase, as our strength increases, you will see that the real-time evaluation of these enchants also increases. So you may go back and see that something simulates higher now that you've populated the rest of the slots, now that you've populated the buffs and the options, than it was simulating earlier. So keep an eye out for that. For now, obviously, Berserking will under any circumstances remain the best enchant for the weapon slot. It's strictly superior to Mongoose, so we'll pick Berserking, and we'll pick the Librum of Three Truths. And now let's start populating. Best helm is Lights On. Do you know why it's not showing you Lights On here? Because you don't have any other Lights On pieces, and until you have at least one piece, the second piece, or until you have at least three pieces, the fourth piece does not have strict priority in real-time simulation over these other helms which provide more base stats. So we need to be smart here. We need to populate our Lights On pieces first. And this is, of course, Arcanum of Torment. We also have a Lights On piece in our shoulder, Sanctified Lights On with Strength. We also use Lights On pants, so we'll go for Sanctified Lights On leg plates. And as you see, since we've already populated our meta gem or on our helm slot, and we have enforced gem requirements on, obviously we don't have any blue gems, so the meta gem is grayed out even inside RAWR. And that is why when I start picking any item, it's showing me the Nightmare tier or blue gems as the highest simulating gem, because if I put one Nightmare tier in right now, it will activate my meta, and that renders it superior to having a strength gem. But obviously for Retribution Paladins, the best place to put the blue gem is not on any other slot aside from the chest slot, so we go for, and again you see, since we don't have three pieces, it's not showing me any further benefit from implementing a Lights On piece here. It's showing me Ichthyrus' Sack of Wonder as the highest simulating, but if I have this on, as you see, this is the best combination of gemming for Lights On Battle Plate, a strength gem, and the Nightmare tier, which will activate our meta gem, so we pick this option. And let's go for an enchant, which for chest is Powerful Stats. It's Greater Axe for this one. And let's keep populating. This will be Penumbra Pendant. Okay, I need to show you something before I can show you Penumbra Pendant. Since this is a plate DPS class and it still uses some leather pieces, some agility pieces, if you start RAWR in its default state, it will not show you any agility pieces, for example, on the bracers or on the belt. There's a setting for that. You go to Tools, you go to Refine Types of Items Listed, and here you select Leather and Mail also. In default state for Retribution Paladins, it will look like this. So you click on Leather and Mail, just so that it shows you your actual best in slot items when you're clicking this list. Now we know that Penumbra Pendant is absolute BIS. It's picking Ankahar Onyx Neck Guard because it has this hit rating, and we are not hit capped yet. See? We are at 0 hit rating, and we are at 2.5 expertise rating, so it's trying to push the hit and expertise items because this drop down list is a result of real-time simulation. But obviously we know better than this. Penumbra Pendant with pure strength gemming. Okay, it's not showing us pure strength gemming. No problem. We'll click this and then we'll right click on the item and go to equip custom gemming, and there we'll select Bold Cardinal Ruby, and there we have our custom gemmed item. course is this slot. It's the back slot. And of course, since we don't have sufficient crit, we don't have sufficient agility, we don't have sufficient strength, the strength pieces are simulating higher. But we know that for Retribution Paladins, Shadowvault Slayer's Cloak is the best item for back. And of course, it needs to come with a strength gem. So we select that, we pick an enchant, and as of this moment, it's showing us greater speed as outperforming all of the other enchants. But since we are going for engineering and we'll be having nitro boots, we might as well have a safety net and go for flex weave underlay here. So that if we are thrown into the sky, we at least have a parachute with which to fall safely and stay alive. Obviously, it doesn't simulate the tabard and shirt slots because it doesn't simulate for anything that is cosmetic. Now we go here, we know that our best in slot is umbrage armbands, we populate that from before. Or, actually, let's leave this slot unpopulated. It's showing you polar bear claw bracers right now, yes, because this is a result of dynamic simulation and the rest of your items are not populated, and it shows you a hit gem in there. Okay, let's populate the rest of the slots and then come back to this slot. So we know that our best trinket is Tiny Abomination because it gives us hit and it gives us the proc. And the second is, at this moment, it's simulating as Whispering Fang Skull. Why? Again, because the rest of the slots have not been populated. So we leave this slot out because I want to demonstrate one other thing at the end of this simulation. Ashen Band of Endless Vengeance with pure strength. That's what we want. Signet of Twilight with pure strength is what we want. Okay, we'll click this and we'll just change the gem. Apocalypse is advanced, and now as we start populating more and more slots, and since this is a strength item, you see it's already simulating the way it should. Nitro Boots, you see it's already simulating higher than Greater Assault or anything else. Sanctified Lightsworn Leg Plates with pure strength gemming is the best in slot item for us. We select that and we go for Ice Scale. Australian Sutured Singe, and there we go. Since you already have sufficient strength and sufficient agility, the agility items are simulating higher than the strength items now. But of course, this is not showing any half gemming because it's not worth your time to half gem the Australian Sutured Singe. And here, since we already have our 4 pieces of tier 10, it has correctly calculated Flesh-Rending Gauntlets with 1 half gem and 1 full gem as the absolute best in slot, as it should be. The enchant, the hyperspeed accelerators are now simulating higher than the hand-mounted pyro rocket. A little test for you, anyone who's simulating for a Retribution Paladin. Don't populate all these slots first, populate only these 4 and then go for the hands. You will see that the Lightsworn Gauntlets comes up because we have 1, 2, 3 pieces of tier 10 gear here, and we've not populated the pants, and at that point we don't have sufficient strength, haste or crit to make hyperspeed accelerators a better choice than hand-mounted pyro rockets. So if you only populate these 4 and the weapon and the Librum, and you click on this slot, you will see that hand-mounted pyro rocket is dynamically simulating better than hyperspeed accelerators at that point, but no longer. And now if we click this slot, this will no longer show us polar bear claw bracers, but it will show us the proper best in slot, which is umbrage armbands. And since we are not expertise capped, it's showing us an expertise gem, and we'll keep it that way for now. We'll also give it the proper enchant of Greater Assault. Now that we've populated all of these things, we'll go to our talent build. We have our glyphs in place, and we are still a little bit short of expertise. We are 0.16% short of expertise. We'll keep it like this. We don't want more than 1 expertise gem in a Retribution Paladin setup. Of course, you could have used a 34 expertise gem, but then you'd be slightly overcapped. We'd much rather put all of our 34 strength gems into Okay, we could use it on our Shadowmon. We could put one in here, and the third one in here. So let's do that. Bold Dragon's Eye. Bold Dragon's Eye. And Bold Dragon's Eye. Now, if we put another Bold Dragon's Eye in here, it should throw up an error. It used to in the official versions, but I'm not going to try that in a fixed version which is made for private servers. Right, where were we? Oh. There we are. We have our 34 strength gems. Everything else is gemmed, enchanted properly. And now, the last thing which I wanted to demonstrate to you, now that we have all of our items in place, we can actually simulate which is the best trinket for Retribution Paladins. And guess what? It's the Sharpened Twilight Scale. If you have this amount of gearing, if you have this amount of strength, crit, haste, and armor penetration, then the Sharpened Twilight Scale is strictly better than the Death's Choice and better than any other trinket. Even the normal Sharpened Twilight Scale is better than the normal Death's Choice. So this is the BIS trinket for Retribution Paladins. This is not me telling you this. This is the theory crafting of all retail telling you this. And now we finally set up the buffs. These are your raid buffs. In any good raid, in any bad raid on Molten WoW, you'll have to check this, but I won't be doing that. In any good raid, you'll have a Protection Paladin giving you Sanctuary. You'll have Paladins giving you Kings with the Strength and Stamina buff coming from here. You will have, as you see, I clicked Blessing of Kings, and the Drums of Forgotten Kings has been grayed out. Because of course. Strength of Earth Totem, Horn of Winter. Let's go for Horn of Winter, so that the shaman can have some liberty with what totems they choose. Attack power, obviously Blessing of Might with improved Blessing of Might. And you see the Battle Shout has been grayed out. Attack power, you'll always have a Marksman Hunter. Damage percentage, you'll always have a Retribution Paladin. Haste percentage, you'll always have a Retribution Paladin. Health percentage, let's say you have a Warrior instead of a Warlock with a pet giving you the health. Intellect, you will always have Mages. Let's not make your Warlock do that. Physical critical strike chance, you should be rolling with Feral main tank, so we'll be going for this. Physical haste, you should always be rolling with Frost Death Knight, so let's go for improved Icy Talons. Spell critical strike chance, you should always have a Moonkin, and which is preferable to having an Elemental Shaman. If the player is of the same quality, that is. No Retribution Paladin is ever given Focus Magic. Let's go for Totem of Wrath here. Amplify Magic is on the target. Let's say you're not using Dampen Magic on players, you have Amplify on the target. Power Word Fortitude with improved Power Word Fortitude, because all of your priests will have this, aside from Shadow maybe. You're using Mark of the Wild with improved Mark, because pretty much every single druid takes these talents. Temporary power boost, let's say you're not given any of these. There are better targets for Hysteria, namely Feral DPS, or even for that matter Blood DPS. And Tricks of the Trade is usually reserved for tank. Shattering Throw is only up for a very small portion of the time, and usually not at all. Let's go for Expose Armor here. Let's say you don't have an Arms or a Prot Warrior, but you do have a Rogue. Let's go for Fairy Fire, you have Druids. Let's go for Heart of the Crusader, you have Retribution Paladins. Let's go for Savage Combat, you have a Combat Rogue. Improved Shadow Bolt from Deep Demonology or Affliction Warlocks. You have Ebon Plague Bringer from the Unholy Death Knight, which is strictly superior to Curse and Moon and Earth and Moon and Curse of the Elements, because it also boosts disease damage, so your Shadow Priests and your Death Knights get empowered. You have improved Fairy Fire from the Moonkin. You have a Flask of Endless Rage. You are drinking Potion of Speed with maybe double pot trick, so you drink one before combat starts and you drink another one when you get to the execute phase. You're using Strength Food, which is Dragonfin Filet, and let's say you're doing a no buff run, so you're not going to be checking any of the Hellscream's War Songs. Now, we have not set one final thing. So we'll go and see that our DPS is simulating at 15,689. That thing is your rotation setting under options. If you go to your rotation, you will see that it has picked up a very shitty rotation for Retribution Paladins. This is not the priority. We do know what the priority is, and the priority is highest priority on Judgment, second highest priority on Divine Storm, then on Crusader Strike, Hammer of Wrath, Consecration, Exorcism. And your fight parameters are, it's a 5-minute fight against an undead boss like the Lich King. Your seal is Vengeance. The target level is 83 because of course it's a boss. Below 20% time, this may be adjusted. For the Lich King, it won't be 18% of the fight. For anything that ends, before its health bar dies, this will be less than 18%. Trinkets are not reset because you're not going out of combat. And this setting, Consecration Effectiveness, if you have Divine Storm resets, which you will have because you have 2 pieces of tier 10, you won't, and if the boss is moving, if it's a mobile boss, you won't have Consecration up for 100% of the time on the boss. It's a better idea to set this at 80% or even less for Helter Skelter fights so that you simulate something that is realistic. So we set this at 80%, and now look at this. The damage has increased. It was 15,600 something. Now we are standing at 16,000, even though we have nerfed our own Consecration uptime. That is happening because we've selected a strictly superior rotation. For some classes, you will have to select your rotation yourself. For some other classes for which it is humanly very difficult to judge what rotation will be best, for those classes, RAWR will automatically give you the optimal rotation here, and when it does that, it ends the rotation with an asterisk. This happens most notably for feral DPSs. So cat DPSs, you will see that RAWR automatically calculates what is the best rotation for your gear, unlike with Retribution Paladins, and it puts that here with an asterisk on top. If you see that asterisk, you will know what your priority or your rotation is. And that should pretty much cover it. I have one other thing. If you go into the miscellaneous tab under options, you will see that there's a stat graph here. We can click this. It takes a little time to simulate, during which time I'll light a cigarette. And remember again that all of these graphs will be dynamic graphs. So this is a graph pertaining to your talent build, your items, your enchants, your buffs, your rotation, your everything. So as we see at this, all strength has the highest slope, so it is your highest DPS gain if you gain points from this end. However, if we look at hit rating here, we see that we have past the hit rating cap. So hit had a slope and now it's parallel to the x-axis. Any further hit from this point on will not increase your DPS. Any further expertise from this point on will only increase your DPS if you select the setting which places you in front of the boss. If you are behind the boss, then obviously after 26 expertise rating you can gain no further benefit from expertise. So it's flatlined. If you are putting in progression gear instead of best in slot gear, as we have done here, if you put in your current gear, sometimes you will see that instead of your main stat, there is an off stat which has a higher slope for a time, and then it flatlines, or then its slope goes down and eventually your main stat overtakes it. That means that there's an important break point of that stat located at that many additional points, and if you hit that break point, then for that many itemization points, picking that stat is a superior choice than picking your main stat. This will happen in progression gearing levels for any class that uses armor penetration, for example. So agility versus armor penetration, as you start getting more and more armor penetration in progression gear, you will see these steps for armor penetration where it goes ahead of agility and then eventually it goes strictly ahead of agility and its slope will remain higher than agility throughout the rest of the range. For instance, for marksman hunters, for Blood Death Knight DPSs, not blood tanks, of course, and all of that. Of course, this is experimental, but in my experience, this is very, very damn accurate. So you can rely on this, and that about covers us for the basics of using RAWR. This will be sufficient for you for 99% or maybe even more of your uses. The last thing I want to show you is that you can cycle through your items here to see if you've selected the perfect item, the perfect gemming, the perfect enchanting. So let's do that before we close this video. You see, Penumbra Pendant with 10 strength and 10 crit is simulating around 15 DPS higher. So we do that. We click on this and our Penumbra Pendant, our hybrid gemmed Penumbra Pendant is already here. So we click it and now it's simulating as the highest, our present item being the half gemmed Penumbra. Shoulders, perfect. Back, again half gemmed, so we select that. Here's the half gemmed one, simulating like 1.6 DPS ahead of what we have now. If 1.6 DPS is not worth your time to do a half gemming, just forget it. Chest, best. Wrists, again the best gemming. Why? Because we have our only expertise gem here. If we move it to strength, we immediately lose DPS. You see this? Look at this. This is the strength gemmed umbrage. This is the expertise gemmed umbrage. And these are other inferior gemmed umbrages. And like this, you can cycle through all of the rest of your gear. Obviously, no one is going to give you the mail gloves. The hunters will be all over that. So this is the best that you'll get. Waist is Trillion Sutured Cinch with pure strength gemming. Half gemming is objectively worse, as you can see here. And all of our other items should be perfect. Let's see. Okay, Signet of Twilight, half gemming is superior. Ashen Band, again, half gemming is superior. Because these are the crit half gemmings. Check this out. This is the crit half gem. This is not hit or haste or anything. Because at this point we have sufficient crit that having a little more crit is better than having a little more strength. We also have sufficient strength. We are standing at above. Where's our strength? We are standing at above 2600, 2700, 2800 strength at this point. So that little bit of strength is objectively worse than that little bit of crit because you have less crit rating. Where's your crit rating? Here we are. Your crit rating is 1308 versus your strength, which is 2769. So the half gems are being preferred on some slots at this point. Trinket. Tiny Abomination in a jar, better than everything else by a wide margin because it gives us hit. In its absence, we'll be hit uncapped. Sharpened Twilight Scale is way ahead of everything else. And obviously, the pure strength gemmed Berserking Shadowmourne is ahead of every other weapon. We don't have anything in our offhand, we don't have anything in our projectile, but we do have something in our range slot. Libram of Three Truths is better because we have a 5-minute fight. If this is a really short fight and you get the proc, then Libram of Valiance will make up much of this gap and may even turn out ahead for you if it's like a 10-second fight. And this procs, this will be strictly superior than Libram of Three Truths. So simulate according to your use case. Don't simulate blindly. Alright guys, that does it. That is my once and for all coverage of how to use RAWR to simulate your characters. You can simulate tanks, you can also simulate healers, but for healers it's not that essential because you know what you're going about. For tanks, sometimes it's really useful, sometimes it's really not useful. For DPSs, it's brilliant. Out 99 cases out of 100 for DPSs, RAWR is the tool that you want to use, and I hope it proves useful to you. Thank you for your time.